Welcome to MoTorque, the program where we bring you cars, bikes, adventure, classics, motorsports, and indeed, whatever wheels that have torque. Here's what we have in store for you this week. Take a ride in the flagship 7 Series BMW. See what's unique about the SS. Check out the action at the Mighty Mini Autocross. Today's world is in the middle of a recession. Prices are going through the roof and essential consumer goods are beyond the reach of a lot of people. This is especially the case in Sri Lanka. And when you look at our car market, you see that the average family car costs 4 times more than it would in any other country in the world. And yet, even with this situation, cars like the car we're going to take a look at today, the BMW 7 Series, still manage to find a market. So, does paying more for a car than the average size house make sense in Sri Lanka especially? Well, we're about to find out. The 7 Series has always been at the leading edge of luxury car design of its respective era. The very first E23 model that ran from 1977 to 1986 was considered the first car capable of taking on the mighty Mercedes S-Class on equal terms. While the E32 that arrived in 1986 actually surpassed the big Mercedes by offering a V12 engine that was smoother and more powerful than anything else available at the time. The next model, called E38, which ran through the mid to late 90s, was a much more athletic machine than the supersized S-Class of its time, which was of course in line with BMW's classic ultimate driving machine tagline. Things then seem to take a strange turn with the Chris Bangle-styled E65 and E66 of 2001, with their coffin-like boot lids and first-generation iDrive system that simply didn't work. But even that model was fixed after a facelift or two, and the 7 rolled on. The current model, codenamed F1 or F2 depending on wheelbase length, is the 5th generation of the flagship Beamer. Considering the strength of the competition nowadays, BMW had to ensure that they brought their A game when designing this 7. And on first impressions at least, it looks like they have done a good job. The exterior finally ditches the controversial design of the previous generation and returns to traditional BMW styling cues. The family resemblance to the 3 and 5 series is deliberate and unmistakable. But some feel that it looks a little too much like the smaller models. Taken as a whole, though, you can say that the styling works, managing to look prestigious while retaining BMW's innate sense of sportiness, especially with the M-Tech body tweaks that our test car wears. Stepping inside transports you to a calming cocoon lined with impeccably cut leather, glossy wood and aluminum highlights that tells you, yes, this is indeed a very expensive car. Now, older 7s could sometimes come across as a bit stark and very functional inside, but not this one. Especially with this color combination, it looks and feels exactly the way you would imagine a luxury car should. And it's not short of toys either. To recite the full list would probably take up the entire program, so I'll just take you through the highlights. Adaptive suspension, active steering, active cruise control, massage seats, optional night vision and about a dozen others. But probably the most useful option in our context is the external camera. This is not just a reverse camera like you'd find on every Corolla, mind you. This one has something called surround view, which somehow bounces the camera image upwards and gives you a top-down view of the car, so you can actually see what's around you from above. That alone is a real blessing when driving this huge machine in town. Now, all the options in the world would make no difference at all if the basics weren't right. And this being BMW, of course, the basics are spot on. The seats up front are supreme in their comfort and support, adjust in more ways than you could possibly imagine, and make you feel instantly at home in the car. On the road, the 7 is a car with several personalities, thanks to its switchable drive modes that BMW calls connected drive. You have several options available, but in Comfort and Comfort Plus mode, the 7 is essentially a smooth and cushy limousine with slurred shifting, a floaty ride and a completely inaudible engine. Switch to Sport mode, things get tauter. The steering starts responding quicker, the transmission shifts faster and it becomes more connected. Sport Plus, which is the ultimate sport mode, abandons all attempts to be comfortable and cushy, and the 7 suddenly turns into a sharp-handling driving machine that seems to just shrink around you. And it even manages to hoover up the road at a rate that really needs to be experienced to be properly believed. That hoovering is accomplished thanks to a masterpiece of an engine. Our test car is powered by a 3-litre twin-turbocharged 6-cylinder powerhouse that puts out 330 horsepower and a massive 540 Newton-meters of torque. Though the 7 is no lightweight, this engine has the guts to generate massive pace, and the car always feels super competent and unfussed no matter what the conditions or the driver's demands are. Which is of course the hallmark of a finely engineered machine. And you can say that despite the passenger focus of this long wheelbase model, the driver's enjoyment is not neglected at all. Now, the really important people in 7 Series world are the people who actually own the cars, and they tend to travel in the back seat. So we decided to take a look at what it would be like back here, and we recruited the services of our friendly BMW representative to drive us around. Now, from back here, I can tell you that this car, which BMW sell as the Executive Jet, is absolutely brilliant. This, mind you, is the long wheelbase version. This means you get even more space than the standard 7 Series. And let me just say, in a car, you actually cannot want for any more space than you get here. The driver is already set to a very comfortable driving position with plenty of space for him. And look, I have over a foot of legroom still remaining. And they also say that this car has the largest amount of space in its class when it comes to legroom, headroom and width because of its wide track. Now, I don't have the exact figures to hand, but I can tell you subjectively, this could very well be the case. You get screens that are bigger than some TVs, or they seem that to you. You've got 2 DVD players, so your 2 rear passengers can be watching 2 completely different movies. Thanks to the stacked DVD system, you've got an onboard computer that you can access from back here. You've got internet access if you order that option, dual zone climate control, and look at this, completely powered and adjustable seats that you can change to suit your mood. You can be all set up for your business meeting, having a chat with people when you're going along, or you can completely recline the seat, put up the powered side window blinds, and just relax and knock off for a bit. So, considered purely on its merits as an engineering achievement, then we can conclude that this 7 Series is simply monumental.
The Mighty Mini Auto Club is of course one of the most vibrant one-way clubs in Sri Lanka. With over 350 registered members and a wide calendar of events, this club always has something going on that's of interest to the motoring enthusiast. And the Mighty Mini Club had its annual autocross in Seeduwa, with over 60 members participating. Now, an autocross is a track event where a particular track is marked out on any kind of surface. In this case, it was gravel, and cars are sent individually around this track and timed. The track markings are done with planted poles which are attached together with tape, and the idea is that if a car hits and dislodges a marker pole, time is added to your run and you get a debit point. So it is in effect a very technical kind of event and requires a lot of concentration from the drivers. With minis, of course, there are essentially three kinds of engines: the 850cc, the 1000cc and the 1275cc. Each of these classes was also divided into subcategories depending on level of modifications, kind of drivers, transmission even, and so forth. So in total, there were 11 different events, and each of these had some very close and interesting competition. While it is a fact that a basic 850cc Mini is a lot slower than a 1275cc modified version on a standard road, the lower powered cars actually had a bit of an advantage in certain cases on this very tight and loose surfaced gravel autocross track. This was mostly because the high powered cars struggled for traction on this surface, and in fact it was a lower powered car, the 1050cc SLA car driven by Ajit Kirti, that set the fastest time of the day at this autocross. In fact, Ajit Kirti himself, driving in the 1275 modified class, which is supposed to be the most powerful class of minis, could not better his own time in the smaller engine car.
Back to where it's silver line, the only place where I can stay. This time, losing grip on what I thought I could, losing touch with where I thought I'd been. Everything turns back to gray. She won't wait around for me. Hey, yeah, yeah. She'll be hiding even when I'm free. Hey, yeah, yeah. Just put me away for now.
One of the standouts was the event for minis with automatic gearboxes. Now you wouldn't expect something as old as a Mini to come with an automatic gearbox, but they actually did. It was an option that you could order almost from the start of production. It wasn't much taken up, but in the modern era, people are fitting more and more automatic gearboxes to Minis to make them more usable. The organizers of this event recognized this trend and ran a particular class for automatic Minis. Another highlight was the specific event for ladies, which was an open event up to 1275cc. There was of course some close competition seen, and the ladies set some blistering times on the autocross track.
only place where I can stay. This time, I'm losing grip on what I thought I had. Losing touch with where I thought I'd dwell. Everything turns back to
Spectators at the site on this day said that it was an absolute pleasure to see the minis and mokes going for it on this tight and technical track, and they hoped that events like this would be a regular feature in Seeduwa. Mr. David Todd, who is of course the president of the Mighty Mini Club, said that he was very happy with the turnout and the outcome of this event, with a lot of tight racing and members having a grand time. He also extended his special thanks to the OIC of the Seeduwa Police, who was extremely supportive for the organization of this autocross and indeed was present, complete with his family, to watch this unique event. All in all, it was a great success for the Mighty Mini Club, and all the competitors said that they were looking forward to next year.
The name Jaguar immediately makes you think of 60s classics like the E-Type, the C-Type and the D-Type, or even more modern cars like the XK, the new XF, and indeed the brand new F-Type. But something that most people don't know is that the company that would go on to become Jaguar were actually making cars in the 1930s as well. That company was called SS Cars Ltd, and the cars that they made were basically the same as what Jaguar would turn out 20 to 30 years later, in that they were beautifully styled, had a decent level of performance, and were absolute bargains for what they were. What we have here today is an example of that very brand, SS Cars Ltd. This car here is an One Airline Saloon from 1937. The second you set eyes on this car, you know what people were on about when they talked about the styling. Although it's still obviously something that was made in the 1930s, it still looks impossibly modern and aerodynamic and low slung for something that's over 80 years old. You compare it to something of that time period, like a Graham Page or a Duesenberg or something like that, and this car is much more low to the ground, much more sleek. And you see the Jaguar heritage in there. You see what Jaguars would become in the styling of this car. Another thing, the car we have today is no mere SS1 Saloon. This, in fact, is a very, very important historical artifact. That's because this very car was owned by Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India. During this period, we can be quite sure that the car also transported another future Prime Minister of India, his daughter Indira Gandhi. In fact, the car's handbook still has a child's scribbled handwriting, in Hindi of course, which is thought to be Indira Gandhi's own childhood handiwork. A piece of history in itself. After Mr. Nehru's ownership, the car was transported to our shores. But then its history gets cloudy. And the next time it surfaced was in the mid-70s, when it was in the care of an enthusiast, who apparently had the car dismantled and stored in boxes. And so it remained until the late 1990s, when the Akbar Ali brothers found it and embarked on a massive and time-consuming restoration to bring the SS1 back to its former glory. As you can see for yourself, the time and effort put in has certainly paid off, And this car is now probably in even better shape than it was when it first left the production line 77 years ago. The airline bodywork, which was considered to be the most attractive shape offered on the SS platform, is now immaculate, and the interior, with its cubic yards of leather and polished wood, makes simply sitting in this car an absolute event. Under that long hood, the 2.1 litre overhead valve 6-cylinder, which was originally a standard motor company engine, has now been completely sorted, and it fires up on the button and moves the SS1 along with a smoothness that makes it hard to believe how old it actually is. The underpinnings and suspension too have been given a complete working over to original specifications, and the car rides and handles just like it should have when it first rolled off the production line. Of course, like all the cars in the Akbar Ali's collection, the SS gets regular exercise and is frequently displayed at motor shows which have classic and vintage car displays, so that visitors too can have a close-up look at its sheer beauty. Now, if you're wondering how SS Cars Ltd, which made this particular car, ended up becoming Jaguar, which we now know today, well, there's an interesting story behind it. SS Cars was quite successful with their formula of good-looking and value-priced cars that had decent performance in the 1930s, but like all other companies, they had to stop production during World War II. After the war ended, they realized that the name that they had built up was now a huge liability, because unfortunately the German Nazi Secret Service was also called the SS, which is not something that you want to be associated with. So, in 1945, SS Cars Ltd changed their name to Jaguar Cars, which turned out to be a good decision for the company, if the past 60 years are anything to go by. The SS1 can really be considered the first identifiable ancestor of the Jaguars that we have today, and as such it is an important piece of Jaguar's history. This particular car is even more of a historical artifact, as we said earlier, because of its ownership, and we should all be glad that the Akbar Alis have saved it from a rusty demise and preserved it for posterity. We've all been in a situation where you come out to your car and you try to start it. You're in a hurry to get somewhere. It cranks and cranks, but it won't start sometimes. Or it doesn't crank even at all. The reason is your battery isn't giving enough power. Now, that could happen due to many reasons, but one of the most common ones is the terminals get oxidized due to environmental exposure, acidity, and so forth. When that happens, they can't conduct electricity. Now, Worth again has a product that can deal with this problem effectively. Suranga is here to explain to us how it works.
So basically, before you apply this, you have to clean the surface
And
remove the oxidization. Then you can use the part cleaner. After that, you can apply this battery-terminal protector. It's a high-quality product from Germany. First of all, before you apply the battery-terminal protector, you have to clean the terminals and poles. So for that, we have a special product called terminal brush from Worth.
Okay.
Then you clean the surface.
Clean the terminal.
In our terminal brush, you can use both sides for terminals and poles. Now you can see the difference between the clean one and the other one.
And there is a major difference.
Yes. After using the brush, you have to clean the surface by using Worth parts cleaner. And the final step is apply the battery terminal protector. Make sure to place this card before you apply the terminals in order to protect the surface. As I said, this has launched in a different way, concept called value-added service. So when you go to Auto Mirage, lab service stations or Dr. Auto, Care Point, all the top leading service station and workshops, and especially car agents, you can contact your service advisor and ask for this. Definitely they will have it.
Well, there you have it. This week's top tip from Worth.